All right, glad to have you back. Despite an improved economic growth rate of 3.54% year-on-year in real terms in the second quarter of 2022, some Nigerians are yet to benefit from the growth in the country's GDP as skyrocketing inflation and unemployment continues to push many citizens into the poverty cycle. According to World Bank, high inflation rates in the country has plunged 7 million people into poverty in just 2021 and will likely plunge more into that net if macroeconomic issues affecting the nation's economy are not urgently addressed. With the Nigerian economy currently facing many social-economic challenges, analysts are of the view that both the monetary and fiscal authorities must reconsider. Yeah, we talked about this, of course, earlier, to tackle these challenges. But let's look at it from another lens. I'm being joined live in the studio by an investment strategist. Is with AfriInvest Assets Management Limited, Mr. Temitope Omosuyi. Thank you so much for your time. It's good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. First, I want to look at the kind of life Nigerians would live at the moment, following the figures that we see from the NBS and all of that. Let's be realistic now and let Nigerians understand us. The situation shows that the poverty level continues to increase. Mm-hmm. Inflation is on the high side. GDP figures not looking good. The key drivers, we're just worried all along. Now, tell me, what kind of life do you think Nigerians would live in 2022? Their salaries are not being increased, but everything is now on the high side.
It's actually very disturbing, that we find ourselves in this condition where growth is not translating to, improvement in living standard. We saw 3.54% growth in GDP, but people are still complaining that prices are high, and we are not seeing a major increase in purchasing power, right? So, and I think it's quite disturbing. And if you look at the GDP numbers and the sector, in terms of the sector performance, it tells the story. Because when you divide the economy into the three categories by the MBS, agriculture, industries, and services, you observe that agriculture sector grew by about 1.3%, and if you look at services, it also grew significantly by over 5%. But industries did not actually perform well. So, and for you to have an inclusive growth, all sectors, you must have a balanced growth. That is, all sectors of the economy must, grow substantially. And even if you don't have all sectors, growing significantly, you must have major sectors that are driving the economy improve substantially. But we've seen that in the last over 9 quarters now, the industry sector has been in recession. And this sector contributes about, close to 20% to the Nigerian economy. So, and we've been talking about what is responsible for the, lackluster performance of the industry, because in that space you have manufacturing sector, you have mining and quarry, you have electricity and the water, sewage, and all that. There are about 4 sectors in the category of industry. Yes. And we'll be talking about the challenges of the, mining and quarry. The top sector in that space is oil refinery. We've talked about how oil theft, low investment in the oil sector affecting this, this particular sector. So I really think that, yes, it's a very tough time for an average Nigerian, even though the growth seems quite attractive. But if you are to look deeply into the growth and where we're coming from, starting from even 2015, you observe that the growth is way suboptimal. So I know the question you want to ask is, what is actually the optimal growth? Because before 2015, the average annual growth rate in Nigeria was about 6%.
And population growth was what at that point?
Was just about 2.6%.
Wow.
Same period, China was growing by over 9%. India was also doing about 6-7%. But from 2015 or 2016 to date, Nigeria economy had only grown by 1%. In fact, it's not even up to 1%. It's about 0.8%. So how do you deliver this growth? Prior to 2016 as well, unemployment rate by the new method was about 10% to 9%. Now we have over 33%. And if you add, underemployment, we are looking at over 50%, in terms of people that are not optimizing their potential. Right? So that is actually showing a lot that, the economy is actually challenged. Industry is also lagging, because of challenges in this sector. And if you look at a lot of macroeconomic challenges in Nigeria, industry is more susceptible than other sectors of the economy. Yeah. For instance, if you look at FS challenges, manufacturers are complaining about how FS illiquidity is affecting, productivity, import of raw material, and under the industry sector, you have electricity. I'm sure you have lost count of the number of times the national grid has collapsed this year. And if you look at also, the industry generally is actually very challenged. And so when you look at that, there's a problem. And lastly, if you look at the structure of the Nigerian economy compared to what should be called an industrialized or developed economy, is also challenged, because for a country to actually compete globally, we have to look at, how we will develop, industry, how we develop industry and services rather than focusing on agriculture. Agriculture has remained quite substantial in terms of its contribution to GDP, over 20%. We don't need that. We need to be more industrialized. So I think it's a very challenging time for an average Nigeria. In fact, by my estimation, right, for Nigeria to be restored to the pre-2016 level, we must grow at an average of 8% per annum. 8% per annum. So if we extrapolate the gap between what if we had maintained the 6% growth that we saw in 2015, that the average growth prior 2016, by now the GDP size should be over 100 trillion naira. But now we have less than 80 trillion GDP, which means that the output gap, that is, the economy is shortfall by about 27 to 30, trillion naira. So we have to, for us to now meet up this, the growth that we have lost in the last, 10 years, we need to grow by an average of 8%. And now we have 3.5%, we are celebrating it. So, it's actually quite obvious why Nigerians are not feeling it, because of two things. One, the growth is not inclusive. It's not a balanced growth. That is, all sectors of the economy are not growing, or the labor elastic sectors that can actually absorb labor are not growing substantially. And the second part is because the economy is largely so primitive.
Some will say that this is a global issue, that Nigeria is not insulated from all of the external forces, factors that we face. We see what's been happening in Russia and Ukraine and all of that, even in the United Kingdom, the United States, poverty, people are losing jobs and all of that. Yes, some jobs are returning, more jobs in some cases. But some would argue here that no, it's not just Nigeria. What would you say to that?
We have, a portion of the economic shock or challenges we are seeing around could be, hinged on what is happening globally. It's quite interesting to know that despite the global issues, you see what is happening in the US. Unemployment rate is less than 4%. Yeah. Despite, in the US and a number of advanced economies, affordability is not a challenge amidst increase in prices. But in Nigeria, affordability is a problem. In fact, before the whole Russia-Ukraine crisis, we've been talking about how the Nigerian economy has to be diversified, right? And in the last over 7 quarters, you can see the performance of the oil sector has been in the negative. In terms of GDP performance, it's been growing by an average, in fact, it's been declining by an average of 10%. So that is a problem. So beyond just what is happening globally, an economy should have been built to be resilient to external shocks. We have a number of countries that are, even despite what we are seeing, you can see the Chinese economic growth is not up to 3% yet. Japan inflation is not up to 3% yet. So we still have a number of economies that are even benefiting from this. Okay, let's even pick Russia. We talked about how the Russian-Ukraine crisis will affect the Russian economy negatively. But as of today, the Russian current account is very strong. The economy, in terms of currency, is the best performed so far this year. As a matter of fact, in Russia, inflation is declining amidst rising inflation globally. So we have a lot of outliers, countries that are not experiencing some of these things. They are immune. So why can't we be among the countries that are immune? So that is the question. It's actually very important to actually get our priorities right. For instance, if you look at the structure of the Nigerian economy in terms of employment.
Let me just interject you. Okay. Let's get those priorities right. What specific sectors would you think that government can, give up policies that would ease up those space and, benefit, of course, create jobs for Nigerians? What specific sectors do you think government need to look at?
I think virtually all sectors of the Nigerian economy is actually challenged as a result of the current macroeconomic challenges and problems, right? So we need to address those challenges. Once those challenges are addressed, investors will begin to pick sectors and invest in them. For instance, we talk about the industrial sector.
Yes.
I'm sure you must have listened to the complaints from the Manufacturing Association of Nigeria. They've been complaining a lot about high interest rates, high inflation,
Diesel,
liquidity, and all that. So, I beg your pardon. So we need to address all of this.
You can clear it.
No. So, thank you. So we need to look at how to just not about focusing on certain sectors. We need a balanced growth. In fact, I think when people talk about the fact that we should begin to look at how to invest more in the agricultural sector, right? Because we are in a world where three securities are very important: food security, energy security, and security of lives and property. The Russian-Ukraine crisis has taught us a very good lesson that energy security is very important. Otherwise, your people continue to, remain in poverty. Food security, the Russian-Ukraine crisis, because these countries account for over 30% of wheat supply, they've also taught us a lesson of how important it is to have food security. And security of life and property, we see what insecurity of lives and property is doing to several sectors of the Nigerian economy. So, in fact, the first thing we need to do is to address insecurity, right? Security of life and property must be achieved before we begin to attract investors into Nigeria. And I can tell you for a fact that there's no amount of increase in interest rate will bring substantial investor to Nigeria in terms of even capital portfolio investment. So I think it is very important we address insecurity. We can now begin to move further to spending on infrastructure. I ask people that what is the importance of investing in infrastructure, and the government wake up the next day to see that it has been set ablaze. Look at the Kaduna Abuja rail. Because of the incident that happened, I'm sure if you are told today to go through that rail to Abuja, you won't consent. That's why the fact that government has expended a lot. Those infrastructure are built with loans, but now it is being granted because of what? Insecurity. And I'm sure no matter how attractive Kaduna is today, if you are told to invest there because of the mindset that there's high level of insecurity, you won't go there no matter how buoyant you are. So insecurity must be addressed before we cannot begin to look at how to begin to support certain sectors of the economy. The CBN has been doing that for a very long time, supporting agriculture, supporting this and that sector. But I think we should address insecurity before we can now move to another layer, which is what? Infrastructure. No economy can actually thrive if there's infrastructure deficit. That is quite much in Nigeria. We talk about, I just mentioned how the electricity, has been quite epileptic and is affecting, small and medium scale businesses, because all countries, all advanced economies, the key, driver or the key engine of growth is MSME. But in Nigeria, you see what is happening today. They have to provide their power. They have to grapple with a lot of challenges. So I think before we begin to look at how, fiscal policy will begin to address infrastructure, and I talk about even our legal system, a lot of other issues, we should address insecurity. Monetary policy can now come into play, and the fiscal policy can now provide adequate support. And I think, again, if you look at what we are seeing in Nigeria in terms of the labor, right, you see that agriculture is still responsible for the largest chunk of employment. That is not ideal. A developed economy or economy that seeks to, be industrialized should not have such structure. In advanced economies and emerging markets, the best you will see around is about 5% in terms of the labor, the share of agriculture to total labor. But in Nigeria, you have about 39%. And services, and while the services is quite small, and you see that industry is even way small, 12%. So we should begin, as we promote agriculture, right? I know, because I talk about food security. As we promote it, we shouldn't look at it from the angle of having more people in the agricultural sector. It's not ideal anywhere in the world. There's technology. We should begin to look at how to address, I talk about insecurity. Once security challenges is addressed, we make it attractive to viable investors and vibrant youth. We don't need more people in the agricultural sector. We just need more vibrant people and more capital in that space, so as to, address challenges that are affecting Nigeria. And one of the challenges is what? Food. It was reported in 2019 that over 56%, of Nigerians' expenses on food. Is it because people eat so much? No, because they have little to spend, because they have little to spend. So I think we should begin to look at all of this and go after a balanced growth. Balanced growth is where you have agricultural sector is doing very well. Currently, it's growing at 1.3%. If you want an inclusive growth, agricultural sector must be growing at 5%. Industry is growing at about 5-6% currently. Services, I beg your pardon. Services is doing about 5-6%, but industry has been declining for several quarters. So we must have 5% or 6% across these three major sectors to have an inclusive growth that will be felt by an average generation. Otherwise, we just see 4%, 5%, and people will keep complaining that it does not really affect them positively.
Let's wrap up now on this note. Now, what will you be projecting? Do you think we could have get into recession one way or the other. Some say the global recession is imminent. There's no way we can escape that. But if that happens, what kind of growth do you see in Nigeria? Maybe the next quarter growth, let's project ahead of the elections.
I think, for Nigerian economy, the structure is actually changing despite, declining, the oil sector for over 7 quarters now at an average of 10%, we should actually discount or just discuss the fact that the economy may go into a recession, because currently we are seeing that the Nigerian economy is largely driven by the non-oil sector. But I think what should even be of importance to us is how to ensure that growth is inclusive. We deliver the 7-8% growth. It's not even about recession now, because we can actually build an economy that is largely immune to oil price shocks. And we have begun to see that, in recent times. So I think we should begin to discard, the likelihood of a recession. As a matter of fact, I think that the Nigerian economy in Q3 will grow by about 3%, and fourth quarter will do about 2.7%. So giving an average growth for the year of about 3.3, 3.4%, but that will not still deliver the kind of growth that will affect people, because economic policy is all about people's welfare. If people are not seeing the impact, then the growth is nothing.
Let me ask you this as we wrap up this segment. You talked about CBN interventions, and we've talked about it. Some analysts have argued that it's not always good to throw money at every challenge.
Exactly.
That there are other ways we could address some of these challenges that could empower people, create wealth, and make people get more jobs. That's talking about addressing unemployment now. That there are other schemes that people could get monies. They will have part of the people that borrowed their monies to be part of the maybe like the management team, monitor them, get the monies back. It shouldn't be all about borrowing. What other way do you think we can address these issues without borrowing money? Some think it's just their share of the national cake, and they take these monies and don't return.
I think, the CBN is actually doing the right thing. You expect that the CBN is the monetary authority that is expected to respond with money, interest rate, and among other, money-related intervention. I think we are not getting much of support from the fiscal authority because of, some structural problem. We talk about the CBN cannot finance infrastructure, right? The CBN cannot address insecurity. And the money CBN is actually putting in certain sectors of the economy cannot address all that. So I think as much as the CBN is trying to support the economy, we need the support of the fiscal authority to actually complement what the monetary policy authority is doing. There's no economy in the world. In fact, I tell people that the most developed economy are the most indebted countries in the world. Because if you want to expand your asset is infrastructure, then you have to, in a way, you must grow your liability. Liability is debt. But the only thing is that the debt we are accumulating, is this translating to substantial level of asset in Nigeria? If it's actually translating to much asset, it will be reflected in productivity, ultimately on employment and aggregate economic growth. So I think as the CBN is supporting the economy, we must get substantial support, adequate support, and sincere support from the fiscal authority to actually drive the desired growth. So we know that yes, there's always a threshold to money support from the monetary policy authority, because there's a threshold that could trigger inflation. There's a threshold, because money supply is a subcomponent of inflation driver. So I think we should begin to look at the CBN is trying on the one hand. We also need the fiscal authority. And we also need the cooperation of our neighboring country, because, some of this insecurity is actually, you see that they have affiliation with some neighboring countries. So it's way beyond just the CBN, fiscal authority, international relations to support the Nigerian economy, so that we take ourselves from where we are now to where we ought to be.
I must thank you so much for your time. Incisive discussion as usual there. Mr. Temitope Omosuyi is an investment strategist. He's with Afri Invest Assets Management Limited. Do enjoy your weekend.
Thank you.